I thought I knew what betrayal felt like when my parents divorced. I was 16, and watching my father pack his belongings into cardboard boxes felt like watching my entire childhood being dismantled piece by piece. But that pain, as sharp as it was, turned out to be just the opening act. The real betrayal wouldn't come for another 13 years, and it would be so calculated, so deliberate, that it would make their divorce look like a mercy by comparison. My name is Charlotte Hayes, and this is the story of how my father chose his second chance at happiness over his first daughter, how he weaponized the law to silence me, and how I fought back to expose the truth that nearly destroyed me. The divorce itself was relatively clean, at least on paper. My mother, Grace, discovered my father had been having an affair with a woman named Vanessa, who worked in his accounting firm. I remember the night she found the credit card statements showing hotel rooms and restaurant bills on days he claimed to be working late. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard everything through the thin walls of our semi-detached house in Manchester. The shouting, the sobbing, the way my father's voice went from defensive to cold in the span of a single conversation. Within 6 months, he'd moved out. Within a year, he'd married Vanessa. I made peace with it, or at least I thought I did. My father, Robert Hayes, wasn't a monster in the traditional sense. He paid his child support on time. He called every Sunday. He showed up to my university graduation with a bouquet of flowers and genuine pride in his eyes. But there was always this distance now, this careful politeness that replaced the easy warmth we'd once shared. Vanessa was always there too, smiling her perfect smile, touching his arm possessively, reminding everyone that she was his present and future, while my mother and I were just the uncomfortable past he'd outgrown. By the time I turned 29, I'd built a decent life for myself. I worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized consulting firm in London, lived in a small flat in Clapham, and maintained a cordial, if somewhat strained, relationship with my father. We saw each other maybe 4 times a year: Christmas, his birthday, my birthday, and one awkward summer barbecue. Vanessa had given him 2 children, my half-siblings Emma and Daniel, who were now 12 and 10 respectively. I barely knew them, which honestly suited me fine. They represented everything he'd chosen over me and my mother. But then Emma called me out of the blue on a Tuesday evening in October. I was sitting on my sofa with a glass of wine and a spreadsheet when my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer. Her voice was small and scared. "Charlotte? It's Emma. Your sister." I sat up straighter, immediately alert. "Emma, is everything okay? How did you get my number?" "I found it in Dad's phone," she was whispering. "I need to talk to you about something, but I can't let Mom or Dad know. Can we meet somewhere? Please?" Every instinct told me this was a bad idea, that getting involved in whatever was happening in my father's new family would only bring me pain. But she sounded genuinely frightened, and she was just a kid. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her the following Saturday at a Costa Coffee near their home in Reading. She showed up wearing an oversized hoodie, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, looking around nervously like she was being followed. When she sat down across from me, I could see dark circles under her eyes that no 12-year-old should have. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I didn't know who else to talk to." "What's going on, Emma?" She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket and slid it across the table. It was a bank statement, and even at a glance, I could see something was wrong. The account was in Emma's name, but the balance showed only £300. There were regular withdrawals of £500 every month, dating back almost 2 years. "This is your account?" I asked, my analyst brain already spotting the irregularities. She nodded. "My grandparents, Mom's parents, they set up savings accounts for me and Daniel when we were born. They put money in every birthday and Christmas. By the time I was 10, there was supposed to be over £15,000 in there. But when I logged in to check it a few months ago, this is what I found." My stomach tightened. "Have you told your parents?" I tried to talk to Dad about it. He said I must have misunderstood, that the account had never been that high, that my grandparents hadn't contributed as much as I thought. But I remember, Charlotte. I remember them showing me the statements when I turned 10, being so proud of how much they'd saved for my education. And Daniel's account is the same. His had even more because he's the boy, and they put extra in for university. Now there's barely anything left. I studied the statement more carefully, my professional training kicking in. The withdrawals were too regular, too systematic to be random spending. Someone with access to these accounts had been steadily draining them for years. Who has access to your account besides you? Just mom and dad. I can't even withdraw anything without their permission until I'm 16. The implication hung heavy in the air between us. I wanted to believe there was some innocent explanation, some banking error or misunderstanding, but I'd seen too many cases of financial elder abuse and embezzlement in my career to ignore the obvious pattern. Emma, this is really serious. If someone's been taking money from your account without permission, that's theft. But I need you to understand that investigating this could cause a lot of problems in your family. Her eyes filled with tears. I know, but it's not just about the money. Daniel's been asking about his account too, and Dad got really angry with him. Told him to stop being greedy and ungrateful. Daniel's been having nightmares ever since. And Mom, she's been different lately. She bought this really expensive car last month, and I heard her telling her friend that she deserved nice things after all her sacrifices. But Dad's always saying we need to be careful with money, that business isn't as good as it used to be. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of my father's failures settling on my shoulders once again. Even now, even in his new family, he was letting someone else cause harm rather than confronting an uncomfortable truth. Give me a few days, I told Emma. I need to look into this properly. But Emma, you cannot tell anyone we met or that you showed me this. Not yet. If someone really is stealing from you, we need to be smart about how we handle it. She nodded, looking both relieved and terrified. As I watched her leave, her small frame hunched under the weight of her hoodie, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about my relationship with my father anymore. This was about two kids being victimized and nobody was protecting them. I spent the next week doing what I do best, analyzing financial patterns. Emma had managed to send me photos of several months' worth of statements for both her and Daniel's accounts, along with some older documents her grandparents had given her. The picture that emerged was damning. Over the course of 3 years, approximately £35,000 had been systematically withdrawn from the children's accounts. The withdrawals always happened on the last Friday of each month, always in round numbers that wouldn't immediately raise flags with the bank. The timing coincided almost perfectly with Vanessa's shopping sprees, according to the social media posts Emma had also shared with me. New designer handbags, spa weekends, that luxury SUV she'd bought. My hands shook as I compiled the evidence. This wasn't just theft. This was a mother stealing from her own children's future, and my father was either complicit or willfully blind. I thought about all the times he'd lectured me about financial responsibility, about saving for the future, about the importance of planning ahead. The hypocrisy burned in my chest like acid. I knew I had to confront him, but I also knew I needed to be strategic. If I came at him too aggressively, he'd shut down and protect Vanessa, just like he'd protected her during the affair. I needed to give him a chance to do the right thing, to choose his children over his wife for once. I called him on a Thursday evening, keeping my voice casual. Hey, Dad. I was wondering if we could meet for lunch this weekend, just the two of us. It's been a while. He sounded pleased, maybe even a little surprised. Of course, sweetheart. Saturday work for you? There's a nice pub near my office. We met at a gastropub in Reading, the kind of place with exposed brick and craft beers on tap. He was already there when I arrived, looking older than I remembered, his hair now more gray than brown, his face carrying the weight of middle age. For a moment, I felt a pang of something like grief for the father I'd once known before everything got complicated. Charlotte, you look well, he said, standing to hug me. How's work treating you? We made small talk through the appetizers, discussing my job, his firm, safe topics that kept us in the comfortable zone of polite distance. But as our main courses arrived, I knew I couldn't delay any longer. Dad, I need to talk to you about something serious. Emma contacted me. His face went immediately guarded. Emma? Why would she contact you? I pulled out printed copies of the bank statements and slid them across the table. Because she's scared and confused and she doesn't understand why her savings account has been drained. Neither does Daniel, apparently. He barely glanced at the papers before pushing them back toward me. This is none of your business, Charlotte. These are my children, my responsibility. These are my siblings, Dad, and someone has stolen over 35,000 pounds from them. That makes it my business when they come to me for help because they don't feel safe talking to their own parents about it. His jaw tightened. You don't understand the situation. Vanessa and I made some financial decisions regarding the children's accounts that are perfectly legal. We're their parents. We have the right to manage their money as we see fit. Manage it? Dad, look at these withdrawals every month like clockwork for years. This isn't management, this is theft. And the timing coincides perfectly with Vanessa's spending patterns. Her new car alone costs more than what's been taken from their accounts. Enough. His voice was sharp now, drawing glances from nearby tables. I don't know what Emma told you, but you're making serious accusations based on a child's misunderstanding. Yes, we've accessed the accounts. We had expenses, unexpected costs. We always intended to pay it back. When? When they turn 18 and need it for university? When they realize their grandparents' love and sacrifice was turned into handbags and spa treatments? He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You have no idea what it's like raising 2 children, managing a household, keeping a business afloat. Your mother filled your head with poison about Vanessa from the beginning, and now you're using my own daughter to attack my wife and my family. I'm trying to protect your children, Dad. That's all I'm doing. No, he said coldly, throwing money on the table. You're trying to destroy my marriage because you've never forgiven me for leaving your mother. This conversation is over, Charlotte, and if you ever contact Emma or Daniel again, we'll have a serious problem. He walked out, leaving me sitting alone with the evidence of his children's victimization spread across the table. I should have expected it, should have known he'd choose Vanessa over doing the right thing. But the finality of it, the cold dismissal, felt like watching him pack his boxes all over again. I paid the bill and left, but I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to my mother's house in Manchester, needing to talk to someone who'd understand. Grace was in her garden when I arrived, her hands dirty from planting spring bulbs, her face lighting up when she saw me. Charlie, darling, what a surprise. Is everything all right? I told her everything, Emma's call, the bank statements, the confrontation with Dad. She listened quietly, her expression growing darker with each detail. I warned him, she said finally, her voice tight with anger. When he first married Vanessa, I tried to tell him what she was really like. But he was so besotted, so desperate to prove that leaving us was the right choice. He couldn't see that she was a leech, that she'd drain him dry eventually. What do you mean you warned him? My mother sighed, pulling off her gardening gloves. Vanessa has a history, Charlie. Before your father, she was married to another man at the firm. When they divorced, there were accusations of credit card fraud, of opening accounts in his name. Nothing was ever proven, but the rumors were enough that she had to leave the company. Your father knew all of this, and he married her anyway. I felt ice spreading through my veins. Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because you were already hurting so much from the divorce. I didn't want to make it worse. And honestly, I thought maybe she'd changed, or that your father would keep better watch over things. I never imagined she'd steal from her own children. That night, lying awake in my childhood bedroom with its faded wallpaper and old swimming trophies, I made a decision. My father had made his choice, and it wasn't his children's welfare. If he wouldn't protect Emma and Daniel, I would. But I needed to be smart about it, needed to gather more evidence, needed to build a case that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. I spent the next month carefully documenting everything. I met with Emma twice more, always in secret, always in different locations. She brought me more statements, screenshots of her mother's social media posts showing expensive purchases with timestamps that matched the withdrawals. I created a detailed spreadsheet showing every transaction, every suspicious pattern, every coincidence that pointed to systematic theft. I also did something I wasn't proud of. I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Chen, a former police detective who now ran his own agency. I gave him everything I had and asked him to dig deeper into Vanessa's background, into her financial history, into any pattern of behavior that might support what I was seeing. What he found was worse than I'd imagined. Vanessa had a trail of financial impropriety going back 15 years. Before my father, there had been another husband, a fiancé before that, even a business partner who'd sued her for embezzlement. In every case, the charges were either dropped or settled quietly. She was clever, always staying just on the legal side of the line, always having plausible explanations, always moving on before anyone could build a solid case. Your father's not her first victim, Marcus told me during one of our meetings, and unless something changes, he won't be her last. The pattern is clear. She finds men with assets, marries them, slowly drains their resources, and when things get too hot, she moves on. The only difference this time is the children's accounts. That's crossing a line she hasn't crossed before, at least not on record. Can we prove she's behind the withdrawals? The withdrawals are happening from joint parental accounts that both your father and stepmother have access to. Legally, they're allowed to manage their minor children's money. Proving that she specifically made the withdrawals and that they were for personal benefit rather than the children's welfare, that's harder. We'd need transaction records showing the money going directly into her personal accounts, or witnesses who can testify about her spending habits. What if Emma and Daniel testified about what they've noticed? Marcus shook his head. They're minors, and they're testifying against their own mother. Any decent lawyer would tear that apart, claim they're being influenced or confused. You'd need adult witnesses, documentation, something concrete that can't be explained away. I went back to the drawing board, thinking about who might have insight into Vanessa's spending. Her friends? Unlikely to betray her? Her family? I didn't even know who they were. Then I remembered something Emma had mentioned. Vanessa's sister, Catherine, who'd been staying with them for a few months earlier in the year. Finding Catherine took some work, but eventually I tracked her down to a small flat in Brighton. When I called and explained who I was and why I wanted to talk, there was a long pause. I wondered when someone would finally come asking questions. She said quietly, "Yes, I'll meet with you, but not in Brighton. Vanessa has friends everywhere. There's a cafe in Eastbourne near the pier. Saturday at 2. Catherine was older than Vanessa by about 5 years, with the same blonde hair, but none of the polished glamour. She looked tired, worn down, and when she sat across from me in the cafe, her first words were an apology. I'm sorry about those kids. I tried to say something while I was staying there, but Vanessa threatened to cut me off completely, and I was in a bad spot financially. I needed a place to stay. What did you see? Everything, the shopping, the hiding of receipts, the arguments with Robert when he questioned her spending. She'd tell him she was buying things for the children, for the house, but then I'd see designer dresses and jewelry she'd hide in the back of her closet. And I saw her accessing the kids' accounts on her laptop once. When I asked about it, she said she was just checking the balances, but I could see she was making a transfer. She got really angry when she noticed me watching, told me to mind my own business. Would you be willing to testify to that if it came to it? Catherine hesitated, fear flickering across her face. Vanessa's dangerous, Charlotte. Not physically, but she knows how to destroy people's reputations, how to manipulate situations. If I go against her, she'll come after me. She's already stolen from her own children. How much worse does it have to get before someone stops her? Catherine looked out the window at the gray sea, the pier stretching into the distance. All right, she said finally. I'll testify, but only if there's a real case, only if it's going to actually make a difference. I won't sacrifice myself for nothing. With Catherine's testimony, Marcus's investigation report, and all the financial documentation, I finally felt like I had something substantial. The question was what to do with it. I couldn't go to the police. As Marcus had explained, the legal situation was murky and they'd likely view it as a civil family matter. I could try to go to the bank, but without my father's cooperation, they wouldn't take action on accounts that weren't mine. Then I thought about Emma and Daniel's grandparents, Vanessa's parents, who had set up the accounts in the first place. If anyone had legal standing to question what was happening with that money, it would be them. Finding them was easy. Emma had mentioned they lived in Bath. Getting them to talk to me was harder. When I called and explained who I was, there was immediate suspicion. Robert's daughter from his first marriage, Vanessa's mother, Patricia, said coldly, "What could you possibly want with us?" "I want to talk to you about Emma and Daniel's savings accounts, the ones you set up for them. Do you know how much money is currently in those accounts?" There was a pause. "Of course we do. We check the balances every quarter. There should be approximately $15,000 in Emma's account and $18,000 in Daniel's. Why? Because there isn't. There's less than $1,000 in both accounts combined. Someone has been systematically withdrawing the money for the past 3 years." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then, "That's not possible. We've been getting quarterly statements. The money's all there. Are you looking at physical statements or online?" "Physical. They come in the mail. Vanessa handles all the financial mail for the household. She forwards us the statements." The realization hit her at the same time it hit me. Vanessa had been sending her own parents falsified statements, keeping them in the dark while she stole from their grandchildren. The audacity of it was breathtaking. "I think you need to see what I've found," I said quietly. "Can we meet?" 2 days later, I sat in Patricia and Gordon's immaculate living room in Bath, showing them everything I'd compiled. Patricia wept openly as she looked through the evidence. Gordon's face turned a dangerous shade of red, his hands shaking as he held the bank statements. "Our own daughter," Patricia whispered. "Our own daughter stole from her children, from our grandchildren. We need to take legal action immediately," Gordon said, standing up abruptly. "We need to contact the bank, contact a solicitor, get this money back." "There's something else you should know," I said carefully. "My father knows about this. I confronted him over a month ago with this exact evidence, and he dismissed it. He accused me of trying to destroy his marriage and told me to stay away from Emma and Daniel. He's choosing to protect Vanessa rather than his children." Patricia's expression hardened. "Then we'll have to protect them ourselves. Those accounts were set up in trust for the children's education. We're named as beneficiaries. We have legal standing to challenge this." They moved quickly. Within a week, they'd hired a solicitor and filed a formal complaint with the bank, requesting a full audit of the accounts and an investigation into the unauthorized withdrawals. They also filed for emergency grandparent visitation rights, citing concerns about the children's welfare and financial security. I thought that would be the beginning of justice, of Emma and Daniel finally getting the protection they deserved. I was wrong. What I didn't anticipate was how far my father would go to protect his wife and his illusion of a perfect second family. The call came on a Friday evening, 3 weeks after Patricia and Gordon had filed their complaints. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, a professional female voice said, "Is this Charlotte Hayes? This is Detective Inspector Sarah Morrison with Thames Valley Police. I need you to come to the Reading Police Station tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock for an interview regarding allegations of theft and fraud." My blood went cold. "I'm sorry, what? Allegations against whom?" "Against you, Miss Hayes. Your father, Robert Hayes, has filed a formal complaint stating that you've stolen confidential financial documents from his home, manipulated his daughter Emma into providing false information, and attempted to extort money from him by threatening to expose fabricated evidence of financial wrongdoing. He's provided a sworn statement, as has his wife, Vanessa. We take these allegations very seriously. I couldn't breathe. The room spun around me. My father had actually done it. He'd flipped the entire situation around and accused me of the crimes his wife had committed. It was so audacious, so calculated that I almost couldn't process it. Those allegations are completely false, I managed to say. I have evidence of actual theft from his children's accounts. That's what this is really about. Then I suggest you bring that evidence with you tomorrow, along with a solicitor. 9 o'clock sharp, Miss Hayes. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by all my carefully compiled documentation, trying to understand how my father could do this. How could he look at the evidence of his wife stealing from his children and decide that the real threat was his own daughter trying to protect them? But as the shock wore off, a different emotion took its place. Anger. Pure, crystalline anger that burned away the last remnants of the love I'd once felt for him. He'd chosen his path, and now I'd choose mine. If he wanted to weaponize the legal system against me, I'd show him what real evidence looked like. I called Marcus Chen first thing in the morning before heading to the police station. I need everything you've got on Vanessa, and I need it documented in a formal investigative report. I also need you to testify if it comes to that. Already done, he said. I had a feeling this might go sideways. I've been documenting everything since day one. And Charlotte, get yourself a really good solicitor. These kinds of cases get ugly fast. The solicitor I hired was named Rebecca Thornton, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in fraud cases. When I showed her everything I had, she didn't sugarcoat the situation. Your father's playing dirty, she said bluntly. By accusing you first, he's put you on the defensive. Even if we prove his wife is the actual thief, the fact that you obtained and distributed confidential financial information could be problematic. The question is whether we can establish that you had legitimate cause for concern and were acting in the children's best interest. The interview at the police station was brutal. Detective Inspector Morrison was professional but clearly skeptical, and the detective constable taking notes looked at me like I was a troublemaker trying to destroy a family. They asked me question after question, how I'd obtained the bank statements, why I'd contacted Emma directly instead of going through proper channels, whether I'd demanded money from my father in exchange for keeping quiet about my fabricated evidence. I told them the truth, showed them my documentation, explained about Catherine's testimony and Marcus's investigation. But I could see the doubt in their eyes. To them, this looked like a bitter daughter from a divorce trying to sabotage her father's new marriage. We'll be investigating this thoroughly, D.I. Morrison said finally. In the meantime, I need to inform you that there's been a restraining order filed against you. You're to have no contact with Emma Hayes, Daniel Hayes, Robert Hayes, or Vanessa Hayes until this matter is resolved. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Do you understand? I understood perfectly. My father had built a cage around his children, ensuring I couldn't help them even if I wanted to. The restraining order meant I couldn't talk to Emma, couldn't provide her with updates, couldn't offer any support. She'd reached out to me for help, and now I was being legally barred from giving it. The next few weeks were a nightmare of legal proceedings, police interviews, and reputation damage. Somehow, word got out at my office about the investigation. Nothing official, just whispers and sideways glances, but I could feel the judgment. My boss called me in for a chat about whether I was dealing with any personal issues that might affect my work. I assured him everything was under control, but I could see the doubt. Then, Patricia and Gordon's solicitor called with an update. The bank has completed their audit of the children's accounts. They've confirmed that approximately £37,000 was withdrawn over a 3-year period. However, because both Robert and Vanessa had legal authority to access the accounts as the children's parents, and because there's no direct evidence of where the money went after withdrawal, they're treating it as a civil family dispute rather than criminal theft. What does that mean for the case? It means we can pursue civil action to recover the funds, but it's going to be a long, expensive court battle. And with Robert backing his wife's story and accusing you of fraud, It's going to get very messy. The children may even be called to testify against their own parents. I thought about Emma's small, scared voice on the phone, the dark circles under her eyes, the way she'd trusted me to help her. The idea of putting her through the trauma of a courtroom battle made me physically ill, but what was the alternative? Let Vanessa get away with it? The situation got worse before it got better. My father hired an expensive legal team and went on the offensive. They filed a civil suit against me for defamation, claiming I'd spread malicious lies about Vanessa that had damaged her reputation and caused emotional distress. They demanded £50,000 in damages. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't destroying my life. I was being sued for defamation while trying to expose actual theft. The legal fees were mounting. Rebecca was good but expensive, and every new filing from my father's lawyers required a response. I had to dip into my savings, the same savings I'd carefully built up over years of responsible financial planning, to defend myself against accusations of the very crimes his wife had committed. But I wasn't completely alone. Patricia and Gordon threw their weight behind me, providing their own statements and testimony. Catherine agreed to give a formal deposition, despite her fear. And Marcus Chen's investigative report, with its detailed documentation of Vanessa's history of financial impropriety, gave us a foundation to build on. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of Vanessa's former friends, a woman named Claire, reached out to me through Facebook after hearing about the case through the local gossip network. She wanted to meet, and when we sat down in a cafe in London, she brought her own evidence. Vanessa and I were close for about 2 years, Claire explained. We met through a book club. She seemed lovely at first, very charming, always impeccably dressed. But then I started noticing things. She'd mention buying something for Emma or Daniel, but I'd never see the kids with those items. She'd talk about how tight money was, but then show up in designer clothes. And once, when I was at her house, I saw her online banking open on her laptop. I glanced at it without thinking, and I saw a transfer from an account labeled Emma Education Fund to her personal account. When I asked about it, she slammed the laptop shut and got really hostile, accused me of snooping. Why didn't you say anything? Claire looked ashamed. Because I didn't want to get involved. It seemed like a family matter, and Vanessa had a way of making anyone who questioned her feel like the crazy one. But when I heard she'd accused you of theft, when I heard about what was happening to those kids, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Those children don't deserve this. Claire's testimony was crucial because she was a third-party witness with no connection to me or my family dispute. She had no motive to lie, and her observations corroborated everything I'd been saying. Rebecca immediately had her depose her testimony formally. Meanwhile, the police investigation into me was slowly falling apart. The more D.I. Morrison looked into the evidence, the more she realized that my documentation was genuine and that my father's accusations didn't hold up. The bank statements were real. Marcus Chen's investigation was professional and thorough. Catherine's testimony was consistent. There was no evidence that I'd fabricated anything or attempted extortion. 4 months after my father first accused me, I received a call from D.I. Morrison. Ms. Hayes, I wanted to inform you that we're closing our investigation into the allegations against you. We found no evidence of wrongdoing on your part. However, we've opened a new investigation into the handling of Emma and Daniel Hayes' trust accounts, and we'll be interviewing your father and stepmother separately. The relief was overwhelming, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this was far from over. My father's civil suit was still pending, and the battle over the children's stolen money was still raging in family court. The court date for the civil case arrived on a gray morning in March. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly ill. My father sat on the opposite side with Vanessa and their legal team, and when our eyes met, there was nothing there. No recognition, no regret, just cold hostility. Rebecca had prepared me thoroughly. The case had evolved beyond just the defamation suit. Now it included Patricia and Gordon's suit to recover the stolen funds, a countersuit from me for malicious prosecution, and a family court review of the children's welfare. It was a tangled mess of legal proceedings, but at the center of it all was a simple truth. Vanessa had stolen from her children, and my father had tried to cover it up by destroying me. The proceedings took 3 days. Witness after witness took the stand. Patricia and Gordon testified about setting up the accounts and discovering they'd been drained. Marcus Chen presented his investigation findings. Catherine described what she'd seen during her stay. Claire talked about her observations. Emma's and Daniel's guardian ad litem, a solicitor appointed by the court to represent the children's interests, presented evidence of the emotional toll this was taking on them. Through it all, my father sat stone-faced, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. Vanessa, on the other hand, performed beautifully. She cried at appropriate moments, spoke softly about how much she loved her children, explained that any money taken from their accounts had been used for their benefit: school supplies, clothing, activities. She painted herself as a devoted mother, being persecuted by a vindictive stepdaughter and interfering in-laws. But then Rebecca cross-examined her, and the facade began to crack. Mrs. Hayes, can you provide receipts or documentation showing that the £37,000 withdrawn from your children's accounts was spent on their needs? I don't keep receipts for everything. That's an unreasonable expectation. You don't keep any receipts? Not even for major purchases? Some. I don't have them all. According to your own financial statements, which we subpoenaed, you purchased a vehicle costing £42,000 during the period when you were withdrawing money from your children's accounts. Can you explain how you afforded that if finances were as tight as you claim? That was a necessary purchase. My old car was unreliable. A Range Rover Sport is necessary, and you paid for it in cash according to the dealer's records. Where did that cash come from? Vanessa's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The judge asked to see the financial records, and the timeline was damning. Every major purchase Vanessa had made, the car, jewelry, spa memberships, designer clothing, coincided almost perfectly with withdrawals from the children's accounts. Then Rebecca called me to the stand. I'd been dreading this moment, knowing my father's lawyer would try to make me look bitter and vindictive, and he did try. He asked about my relationship with my father, about the divorce, about whether I'd ever forgiven him for leaving my mother. He tried to paint me as someone with a grudge, someone who couldn't let go of the past. But Rebecca's preparation paid off. When she had her turn, she asked me to walk through my decision-making process, step by step. Why did I investigate? Because a scared 12-year-old asked for help. Why did I gather evidence? Because the evidence needed to exist if anyone was going to take the situation seriously. Why did I confront my father first? Because I wanted to give him the chance to do the right thing. Miss Hayes, Rebecca asked, when you first discovered what